All right, once again, thank you so much for joining me as we conclude our series on the I Am Easter Devotionals, where we've been walking through the 7 I Ams of Jesus throughout the book of John. And I know that as we conclude this series, we finish with one of the most powerful things Jesus ever said when he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And yesterday we just celebrated our Easter celebrations at home. And I know for so many of you guys, they looked radically different than what they did in the past. You know, we have so many traditions, our families, we have 3 of these things that we're usually trying to navigate with people coming in town, and we're always trying to get schedules aligned. But at the same time, in the midst of that chaos, I think every single one of us would have taken that chaos versus what we had, which was, it was a sweet time of celebration with our family. We just did some things together, but it's not the same. It's not the same when everybody's not coming together, gathered around the table, telling stories, laughing, going outside with the nephews, playing basketball. I definitely missed my wife's grandmother's chocolate pie. That's probably one of the things I look forward to the most. I know for so many of you, Easter just looked tremendously different. I know that in some ways it was good just being together. It was good slowing down, but in so many ways I know that it was disappointing. I know it was hard. I was sitting here talking to a guy just now. He's actually on the other end of this camera, and I was talking to him about what his Easter celebrations are going to look like, and he was telling me that he basically just had a sandwich for Easter, and that's just tragic. That's depressing. I mean, he didn't get a chance to go home to Dallas to be with his family, and he didn't get his grandmother's brownies that she'd made, and so he had to have a sandwich. So I know there's a lot of disappointments. That's just sad. And in the midst of all of that, in the midst of all this chaos, we know that we're losing some of these little moments that are kind of these apex moments throughout our years. And we know that Easter being one of those, because it is the culmination of everything that we believe about Jesus Christ, that he came for us, that he bore our sins on the cross, that he laid down his life for us. And we celebrated that in our homes, but it's not the same when you don't get to come together for that corporate worship where you come together, you rally around one another, and you just sing that your Redeemer lives. Then when you just come together and you hear all the voices of everybody just singing their beliefs wholeheartedly, praising the name of Jesus for conquering the grave and giving us victory, and that he wasn't trapped in that grave, but he conquered it. And 3 days later, he rose from the grave and showed himself to his disciples, and the world as we know it completely changed as the church caught fire for his name's sake. And I know that it was hard getting into that moment. It was hard getting into there because of what this virus has brought upon our homes. The shelter in place has changed so many things for us. And it's left a lot of these moments kind of lacking. It's left so much disappointment. And listen, if there is ever a story when Jesus would give his I am statements that would really resonate with this moment, it is this one, because this story is filled with disappointment. This story really matches where we are at in this time right now, and yet in the midst of this moment of disappointment, of heartache, of pain, of sorrow, of looking at things of how they should have been or could have been, we get to see how all things come together for his good, for his name, and for his glory. And so we're just going to start reading in John chapter 11 right now, and we'll kind of set the background. We'll walk through this story a little bit and just kind of be challenged about our response and if we can respond in a similar manner in the midst of these more trying and difficult times in our lives. Chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. This Mary was brother of Lazarus, now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And so if you think about this moment right now, we've got Lazarus, we've got Mary, and we've got Martha. And they are in this kind of dire moment. We know that it had to be a pretty big and serious situation because Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was sick. And it wasn't just a simple sickness. It was he is on his deathbed sick. And so they sent help to the only one who could rescue them in the midst of this situation. And they send word to Jesus. And it says in this that Jesus loved them. It actually says about all 3 of them, which is very unique. It could have just said that he loved the family of Lazarus, but instead it says that he loved Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, to show that there is this individual love that he has for each and every single one of us. And throughout that, we see that, okay, he's already got a plan. He already knows what's happening. He says, this sickness will not end in death. It'll end with the glory of Jesus Christ being revealed, the glory of himself being revealed. So he's going to use this moment for something much bigger than anyone could possibly understand. And yet, in that, we know the magnitude of the situation. We know that Mary and Martha are grieving. They're pleading for help. They're asking for all this help. And yet, Jesus stays where he's at for 2 days. He could have snapped his fingers. He could have simply spoken Lazarus into healing and health, and he didn't do it. He could have gotten up and immediately left to show how much he cared, and he didn't move. So there's something bigger going on here, and this moment was going to be used for his glory in a way that we couldn't understand. Just like right now, we are all in these moments, in these situations, and we can't understand what's happening. We can't understand when we're in the midst of job loss, financial income shortages, when we're in the midst of our kids being home with us, and we're trying to figure out how to continue to work and do our jobs while making these Zoom meetings with teachers and trying to crisis school our kids, because it's not homeschool. Homeschool, we have more preparation. This is crisis schooling. We've got all these things going on right now, and then we've got these little moments where we can't even get together and celebrate with the big traditions that we have for Easter. And then we've got some more tremendous moments in our life right now where people are actually getting sick and dying from these things, where people are in the hospital right now with sickness and can't even be visited by people. There's so much uncertainty and so much is going on. And we know that in this moment, Jesus Christ could speak this disease and he could speak it into ceasing. He could kill it on the spot, but he hasn't. He's allowed it to continue for a reason. And that reason is that he will get glory through the midst of this. And we know that he is the God of glory, with or without us. We know that before he ever created us, he is the God of glory. And so that means that he wants to use us for his purposes. He wants to draw us to himself, to be fully dependent upon him in this moment, and that we would seek him out in the same way. And I know that like Martha and Mary, we've been pleading, and yet it feels like he's sitting idle. And so we've got to ask ourselves, what is he doing in this moment? What does he want of us? How does he want us to respond in the midst of all this so that his name will be praised? So let's keep looking into this. We're going to jump over to verse 17. And so now he's traveled, he's left. And so in verse 17 it says, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Verse 24, Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. In verse 25, our pinnacle verse, it says, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Verse 27, yes, Lord, she told him, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into this world. You see, in the midst of this, he shows up. So 2 days later, he waits, and then he shows up. And by this point, Lazarus is in the grave. The situation seems like it's at a complete loss. It seems like he showed up a little late, a little too late. And so he has this conversation with Martha. Mary stays home. Martha approaches him, and she says, I know that if you had been here, you could have saved him. But even now, I know that if you ask, the Father will grant you permission to do whatever it is that you ask. And in this, Jesus is really beginning to test her faith. And he really begins kind of this little exchange with her. And ultimately, he wants her to understand who he is. And it's not an idea. He doesn't have a piece of something. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. He says, I am the life giver. I am the life breather. He goes, this death, this world, this broken world will not have the last say. He sees the greater picture, and even though we can look at some of these situations as being finite and being final for all of us, we can look at them. And Jesus ultimately shows that they are not. They are nothing of the sort, that they are expanding, that the way he looks at time goes way beyond how we look at time. And even though we may pass in this life, we know that we're living with him in the next for us who believe in him. And he says that, listen, And Martha says, I believe that. I believe in the resurrection. I believe that he can be with you one day. And he says, I don't want you to believe in the one day. I want you to believe in the life-breathing power of today. We all have that comfort of eternity if we believe in him. If we believe in him exactly as Martha does. And whenever he asks, do you believe who I am? Do you believe that I am the resurrection and life? She says, I believe in you as the Son of God, the Messiah. She says everything. She doesn't say, I understand who you are. She says, I believe with my whole heart who you are. She displays an extraordinary faith. When we wake up every day, we're dealing with hardships. We're dealing with issues, and we know that one day all of this will come to resolution. But Jesus wants us to wake up today and know that he is the resurrection and the life breather of today. That when we wake up today, regardless of circumstances, regardless of heartache, disappointment, pain, not getting to celebrate him in the manner that we feel is worthy of his great name, not getting to do these things with our families, we know that we still have one obligation, and it is to praise who he is and to believe in who he is with every fiber of our being, and to continue the day that he has given us today, whatever he's allowed for us today, so that we can bring his name glory in how we respond and how we believe and how we live our life for him. And he shows that his ultimate purpose is to bring us joy. He shows that his ultimate purpose is to bring us through all this so that his name would be the one that gets all the glory, and that we would be dependent upon him, understanding that he is the miracle worker, that he can be our provider and protector, that if we have a shortage anywhere in our life, that he goes far beyond, superseding that and giving us far beyond what we could ask or imagine. In this moment, Martha had hope in the future, but Jesus gave her hope in the present. And if we skip on over, we see one of the greatest miracles in all of Scripture. In verse 38, it says, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. And then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? I want to read that verse again. Verse 40, then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in the strips of linen and cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. This is incredible for every single one of us. The moment, if you picture yourself in this moment, there would have been this stench. They're terrified. It's been 4 days. After 3 days, there was this little bit of superstition that they believed that the body kind of hung around, that the spirit hung around the body. And so after 3 days, it would basically believe that there's no hope. There's no way they're coming back. There's no hope in this situation of a return. You would have to have that future hope. But Jesus wants them to know that there is a present hope if you believe in who he is. There's a present hope, like it says in verse 40. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? Whatever it is that you're going through right now, Jesus has the power to fully resurrect it, to fully breathe life, to get you through these situations. And that if you believe in him, and if you have faith in these moments, whatever it is, wherever you're hurting, wherever you're frustrated, wherever you're overwhelmed, if you believe, you will see the glory of God as he works these things out for his glory in the midst. And he's going to work them out through you. Martha would one day get to look back, and I got to imagine the conversations that she has as she retells this story over and over and over about this hopeless situation where Jesus calls out the name of her brother, and he comes walking out of this tomb. It's incredible to think of. And one day we're all going to get to look back on this moment. And we're going to remember this moment, and we're going to tell stories of how God worked in us through this, how he got us through these times, how he provided in ways we couldn't ask or imagine, how he took care of us, how he allowed us to do things we never thought possible, how he gave us patience, how he provided for us in ways that only he could do in and through us. We are going to tell the miracles of Jesus for all of eternity. But it starts right now with believing in Him to accomplish them in our life. We just celebrated the greatest miracle of all, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we just witnessed one of the greatest miracles He performed in Scriptures, the resurrection of Lazarus. Let Him be that same God of your life. Trust Him to do it, and you will see His glory. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Thanks for spending your time with me.